Hey Cake Chums and Mini Chums, and welcome back to the Mr. Baker's Cakes Kitchen and another episode of Mr. Baker's Cake School. Now you might recall that in last week's episode I said there had been a lot of requests to try some more savoury recipes, so in last week's episode we had a go at making pizzas from scratch. But based on the stats on that video, I don't think you guys are as interested in savoury as you thought you were. So this week we're going to be going back to the sweet recipes and trying another one that again has been requested an awful lot. Now if you're getting into your baking, one recipe that you're going to need to have in your repertoire is a really good recipe for chocolate chip cookies. Now as somebody who loves, and I mean loves, a chocolate chip cookie, they're not something I bake an awful lot of because otherwise I'd eat them all. But this week I've done lots of research trying to find the perfect recipe that's not too complicated so you guys can have a go at it, but also captures all those gorgeous flavours and textures that you expect from a really good bakery style cookie. You know the ones I mean, crispy around the edge and really gooey in the middle. When I say I've done a lot of research, I mean I've baked a lot of cookies and I've eaten a lot of cookies. So after this week's episode, I don't know if I'll be able to look at another cookie for a while. But as you've probably gathered, in this week's episode of Mr. Baker's Cake School, we're going to be making bakery style chocolate chip cookies. Let's get to the video. Now, as I say, I absolutely love biscuits and cookies. They are probably one of my favourite baked items to eat. And as I said in the intro, that's one of the reasons why I don't bake them all too often, because otherwise I would eat them constantly. When it comes to finding the perfect recipe for cookies, I really like recipes that you can make in advance and then store batches of in the freezer so that every time you fancy some cookies, you can just pull out some cookie dough, pop it on a baking sheet and throw it in the oven. So in the recipe we're going to be exploring this week, I've tried to pull some of the best bits of the different recipes I've been looking at and hopefully create one that you can use to make a huge batch of cookies to enjoy all in one go, or you can put some away in the freezer and bake them up as you want to. But anyway, that's enough chat from me. I think it's time to get baking. So it's time to go and wash your hands, pop on your apron, and let's get cracking. Before we get started, I'm going to begin, as always, by taking you through all of the ingredients you will need to make your chocolate chip cookies today. Now, because today's recipe has been adapted from a variety of American recipes, some of the numbers might seem a little bit strange, but it's mainly because American recipes quite often use things like cups and sticks of butter, which of course we don't do here in the UK. We weigh our ingredients. So if some of the numbers are a bit random, that's why. Okay, so the first ingredient you're going to need is 380 grams of plain flour. And again, if you've watched my previous videos, you will know that that's the flour without any sort of raising or leavening agent in it. This of course means we are going to need to add our own raising agent, and therefore you will need 1 teaspoon of bicarbonate of soda. You will need 225 grams of room temperature butter. Now, as always, I'm using slightly salted butter, which means that I won't need to add additional salt to the recipe. If you only have unsalted butter, you can just add a little pinch of salt as well. You will need 300 grams of caster sugar, and I'm using golden caster sugar today because that will help to give a really nice caramelly taste to your cookies. To also help give us that nice caramelly taste, I'm also going to be adding 50 grams of soft dark brown sugar. You can just add an extra 50 grams of the golden caster if you don't have the soft brown sugar, but I really like, again, that nice molassesy flavour it brings to the cookie. You will need 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, 2 large eggs, and 340 grams of dark chocolate. Now you'll notice I'm not using chocolate chips because I really love when cookies have nice big chunks of chocolate in them. And so for that reason, I like to chop up bars of chocolate rather than use chips. If you have chocolate chips, you can of course use them. And if you have a mega sweet tooth, you might prefer to switch your dark chocolate to a combination of half dark and half milk chocolate, or even just milk chocolate. But yes, that's everything that you will need. Now, I will be honest with you, this is one of those recipes that is so much easier if you do it in a stand mixer like my Kenwood K-Mix over here. But as I've said in previous videos, I don't like to assume that you all have one. So for that reason, as always, we're going to be making our cookie mix today in our big mixing bowl. But of course, if you do have a stand mixer like this one, or even a hand mixer like this small one here, then by all means use them. They will make your life a lot easier. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, just like when we made our cupcakes actually, is begin by creaming the butter and the sugar together in our big bowl. Now, because it's quite a warm time of year, room temperature butter is actually really soft. So I haven't bothered slicing this up at all. Although it does make our life easier now, there is an extra step that we will need to add because it is quite warm. I'll talk about that when it happens. So in with that butter, I'm also going to add in my golden caster sugar. I'm just breaking up any lumps that might be in there with my fingers quickly. And of course my soft dark brown sugar. And then just using a wooden spoon, I'm going to mix these together until it's really pale and fluffy. Again, this is definitely the sort of thing that's a lot easier if you have a machine doing it for you. And when you've been mixing it for a while, you should hopefully start to notice that the mixture gets a bit paler in colour. Now, we don't want to mix it too much more than this, because what that can actually do is beat air into your mixture, which will make your cookies rise up in the oven, but as soon as you take them out, they'll go and go flat again. And we don't want that to happen. If I was using an electric mixer to mix these together, I probably wouldn't run it for more than about 2 minutes. When it comes to mixing by hand, I'm just going to mix it until it looks a bit pale and I'm too out of breath to carry on. Once you've got to this stage, we're then going to add in our vanilla extract and our 2 large eggs, and I'm literally going to put them straight into the bowl. And then again, just by using my wooden spoon, I'm going to mix them until they're fully combined. And then once all of our wet ingredients are combined, we can add in our dry ingredients, which of course are our bicarbonate of soda or baking soda and our plain flour. And that's why we wear an apron. Now, like with most of our recipes, we're just mixing these ingredients together until we can't see any more flour. But I don't need to mix it much further than that at all. You should find that the mixture starts to stiffen up slightly once those ingredients are all combined. At that point, I'm going to set this aside and I'm going to turn my attention to my chocolate. Now, as I said earlier on, if you would prefer to use chocolate chips, then that's absolutely fine. But you'll see when I bake my cookies that by leaving my chocolate in slightly bigger chunks, you really get that lovely payoff when you break open a cookie and you see those big chunks of chocolate. For my chocolate, you can see that I've started just with some bars. I'm going to take a sharp knife and I'm going to remember to work safely. We've talked about this before, but I put my hand on top of the chocolate with my fingernails pointing towards where the knife will go. This is actually called the claw, and that's because of the shape of our hand when we're cutting. And it just means that if the knife does slip at all, it's going to hit those hard fingernails rather than cutting my skin. I'm going to start by cutting across my chocolate in one direction, and then I'm going to turn and go in the opposite direction to make some chunks. This can be quite tricky, so if you want to get an adult to do this bit for you, then that's absolutely fine. So having done one of my bars, if I get a little handful of my chocolate, can you see that I've got some smaller bits that are kind of the size of a chocolate chip, but then I've also got some nice big chunky bits as well. I'm going to add this chocolate to the bowl, and then carry on chopping the rest. And then once all of your chocolate has been added into the bowl, again, it's just a case of stirring it through. Now, once you get your cookie dough to this stage where all that chocolate is evenly distributed throughout the rest of the mixture, then you have a few options. One thing you can do is take it at this point, wrap it in some cling film and pop it in the fridge overnight. And that will allow those kind of caramelly flavours that we were talking about from the dark brown sugar and the golden caster sugar to really start to develop a little bit. Just like with a lot of cooking, the longer you leave things to sit and mix, the better they tend to taste. However, I'm not very patient when it comes to baking, and the last thing I want to do now is wait a whole nother day to be able to enjoy some cookies. So there is a bit of a shortcut you can take. What I'd like you to do is take a couple of baking sheets and I want you to line them with greaseproof paper. Now we've done that in quite a few videos now. It basically just means cut a piece of greaseproof paper the same size as your baking tray and place it on top. Now you can see that I've cheated a bit because I've already done a batch of cookies on these this morning when I was testing this recipe out. So I'm just being lazy and using it again. Now to portion my cookie dough, I like to use the same ice cream scoop you saw me using in my cupcake video. I find that using one of these filled to the top gives me the perfect amount of cookie dough to make a cookie. So I take a scoop of the dough, push it flat, slide off any excess, and then that has a special tool on it when I push that will pop out the perfect amount of cookie dough. Now cookies will spread a lot when you bake them, so you need to make sure you leave plenty of room for them to do that. Otherwise you can end up with one giant pan of cookie. So on this pan here, I'm only going to do 6 cookies. Oh, and in case anyone's wondering, this ice cream scoop gives you about 3 tablespoons of mixture. So if you don't have one of these, you can use your tablespoon measure to ensure you've got the same amount that I have. So here you can see that I have scooped out enough dough for 12 cookies, and these need to bake in the oven around about 180 degrees for about 15 minutes. Now, if I put these straight into a preheated oven now on a warm day, what you'll probably find will happen is they will melt and expand more than I want them to. It's not so much of a problem in cooler weather because of course all of our ingredients at room temperature start out cooler as well. But on a warm day like today, just before I pop them in the oven, I like to chill them down in the fridge for a few minutes. For that reason, I'm now going to go and preheat my oven at this point and put these in the fridge while I'm waiting for it to come to temperature.
A few moments later.
So I've set my oven to preheat to 180 degrees C, and while that's been preheating, I've had these scoops of cookie dough sat in the fridge. You can see that they've now gone quite hard, so if I wanted to, I could actually put these into a freezer-safe bag, seal it, and pop them in the freezer, meaning that I could just take some out as and when I want to bake up some cookies. What chilling them down will also do is it will mean they won't spread too much when I first put them in the oven, because otherwise I could end up with cookie flavoured pancakes, and we definitely don't want those. So now my oven is preheated and these are nice and chilled, I'm going to pop these ones into the oven for about 12 to 15 minutes. Don't worry if when they come out they're still a little bit bubbly and they don't look quite done, because they will continue to cook on the hot trays for a few more minutes. So yes, into the oven, 12 to 15 minutes until they're just starting to go brown on the edges, and then pull them out. And I will see you in 12 to 15 minutes.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
And as always, through the magic of editing, there is my first batch of chocolate chip cookies. Now, like I said just before the video, you'll notice that they're still very soft in the middle, and that's absolutely fine. That's what we want, because they will continue to cook on the trays for a few more minutes. And then after about 10 minutes, I'm going to transfer them onto a cooling rack and let them cool down completely. While they're doing that, I'm going to portion up the rest of my cookie dough, pop it onto some more trays, put those in the fridge, and then once they've chilled down, I'll switch them into some freezer bags and they'll go in the freezer for next time. Okay, so it's been about 10 minutes. I've put the rest of my cookie dough in the fridge, and in about half an hour or so, I'm going to transfer that into freezer bags and put it in the freezer. But in the meantime, I thought you'd like to see what these guys look like while I'm putting them onto the cooling racks. So, they've hardened up slightly now, which means I can pick them up. And if I flip one over, you'll see that it's got a lovely golden brown colour. You can also see some of those big chunks of chocolate in there. So these are now going to go onto a cooling rack until they're completely cool, and then they can go into any sort of airtight container for up to 5 days, if they last that long. Now I don't know about you, but one of my favourite ways to enjoy a cookie is warm from the oven. And now that these have cooled down enough, we should be able to eat one now. So if I take this one here and do it in front of the camera, you should see that in the middle, you've got that nice gooey chocolate, but around the outside it's gone nice and crispy. And of course, as is tradition, I get to taste of it. Oh my goodness, they are so good. You'll see, because we've used the chunks of chocolate rather than chocolate chips, we've got some really lovely big pieces of melted chocolate in here, which of course, as they continue to cool down, will harden up a bit. Because we've gone for the dark chocolate rather than a milk chocolate, they're not too sweet. Although if you have a super sweet tooth, then by all means make them with milk chocolate. But I have to say, the balance of the super sweet cookie dough with the almost bitter dark chocolate really means that these are a lovely balanced recipe and so delicious. So there you go guys, that is how to bake a batch of bakery style chocolate chip cookies with that lovely crispy edge and that soft and chewy middle. Now, as always, if you do have a go at baking along with this week's episode of Mr. Baker's Cake School, please do share the images of your bakes with me over on social media. If you head down to the description box below this video, you'll find all my links for Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, you name it, I'm on it. And of course, if you haven't already subscribed to Mr. Baker's Cakes here on YouTube, you can do that by hitting the big red button down there on the right. And if you click the bell right next to it, that will make sure you get a notification every time I upload a new video. If you did enjoy finding out how to make bakery style chocolate chip cookies, then please do give this video a thumbs up. That will make sure that YouTube knows to show this video to more people, and it will tell me to keep making more content like this. Now, just before I go, as always, do let me wish you a happy and healthy week. Stay safe, stay well, and I'll see you at the same time next week. Take care, guys.